Hi everyone, I'm here with Nathe. His channel is The Third Wish. Nathe is a psychic intuitive and an expert in card reading. He's been doing this for many, many years. So we're going to talk a little bit about what he does, and we're also going to look at current world affairs, politics, etc. And of course, I'll bring in my connections to astrology and how it all interweaves. So first I'll let Nathe explain a little bit of what he does and where he comes from, and then we'll go from there.
Well, first of all, Andre, thank you so much for having me on your channel. I really appreciate it. I've been watching it for a very long time, and so I appreciate your invitation after we met to read my chart. And so thank you so much for taking the time and having me. Like you said, I'm a card reader, like I'm a psychic card reader. I've been reading cards. Actually, I remember the first time I was reading cards, I was 8 or 9 years old, so a long, long time ago. And it was just playing cards. I had a book, I was using my intuition, and then I was trying to make sense of what I was seeing. And I was starting to share with my parents. And I've constantly, developed those skills, reading different tools, not just cards, different divination systems. And so I've been, doing this kind of all my life. It's only in the last 5 years that I'm doing this professionally, just as a full time. And maybe you can hear it in my accent. I'm originally French, but I live in San Francisco for 20 years. I'm also American, so I'm a dual citizen. And then now I live in the south of Europe in Portugal. And so I have been working with my clients for a long, long time. But it's only recently, like in January, that I opened a YouTube channel. And I really didn't know how it would go. It was an idea that I discussed, of course, seeing other people have their own channels. But I really started with putting some predictions for 2025. And so there's a video you can see on my channel, which is a 2025 predictions. And then there's a follow-up video because there were a lot of questions. And then this video got 40,000 views out of starting from scratch. So it really
Impressive.
hit really, really strongly. And so that actually allowed me to put more work out there, to do some collaborations, to share more my work with others. And so this is kind of where I am today, where I've kind of wanted to share what I see, for the political landscape, not just the US, but I like to look at the whole world. And then for me, also, I wanted to work collaboratively with someone who's more an astrologer, because I feel that as we work in this field, I want to bridge, the world of psychics and card readers, and also astrologers. And sometimes those worlds, I think they really appreciate each other, but they don't necessarily work together in the sense of, yes, there are conversations, there are discussions, but how can we, understand each other more, and how, understanding how you make predictions, how would a card reader make predictions? And from that understanding, I think it really helps kind of the field, so to speak. Before we get more, I would just mention two things that I have going on right now. I have created my own tarot deck, so it's available online on Etsy or Amazon. It's called The Mystical Tarot of the Saints. And then I have a basic foundation of tarot class on March 15. And it's also, you can register, you'll see the information on my channel. So before we go further, I just wanted to put a little bit of a note there for that.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Yeah. So speaking of, uh, maybe first looking at your sense of, you said the world, predictions for different countries, etc., or just the overall view. What would you say are your key points or the things that you see for 2025?
Well, what we see in the world, but are also corroborated with the predictions, is, we see more and more of a movement of right wing, I would call it this way, where people, there was a time where the world was opening up to others, to other countries, but also to other people, other groups of people. And so it's like a pendulum effect, right? And then we are now going towards the opposite side of the pendulum effect, where it's more of a retraction. The energy is more within. And even if you look at it from, the 2020 pandemic, this was one of the first sign, in my view, of restriction, just because we were literally restricted at home. And so this energy that I feel is an energy that is very inward, not outward.
Yeah, that
And
makes a
so
lot
that
of sense.
explains, the energies around us and how each country is almost like looking for themselves in a way.
Yeah, it's like you could say it's a contraction, as you said, retraction,
Yeah.
contraction. Yes, yes, where countries are well, some countries are, let's say, because we don't know yet whether all the countries will do this. Is your sense that in the current environment where the U.S., as it's currently being led, is at least appearing to contract, does it feel to you like the entire European bloc will also contract that way, or are they more likely to ally together to act as a counter to the American withdrawal?
I feel this is a great question because I feel like you could really look at it as from a European perspective as a threat or an opportunity. Um, it is very clear, you've seen JD Vance and Trump saying to Europe, basically, if I shortcut, you're on your own, right? You need to step up in your defense. Yes, there's NATO, but you need to step up because we're not. Basically, the message is uh, our priority is not Europe. We have to worry about China. We have to worry about other things. And so you're on your own. This could be what Europe needed to be more together, because it's very, you can't really compare Europe as the US. The US is a lot of states also as well, but the European culture is very similar to each other, but also lots of differences, like between the Baltic countries and the southern countries, the culture is different. The only thing that unites Europe is, and not all countries, is the euro, but it feels like it's more of a club for commerce, right? A club for, and so there's never really been like a Europe for the defense or Europe for that had more of a feels more united, and it's never felt like there was really a federal movement. But it with the US pulling away, there's clearly a decision point, a crossroad to say, oh, either we unite or we're going to be lost in the sea of the different big energies between the big of this world, like China, the US, Russia, and Russia is obviously a huge threat.
Right, right. I mean, this is the thing that um, the the current administration in the U.S. is saying that, at least for now. They're being emphatic, and they're also, we're beginning to see rifts. We're beginning to see potential disagreements within the U.S. Or what is your sense? Is your sense that the U.S. will just continue in this way, and we're looking at 4 years of pulling away sharply and wanting nothing to do with the Europeans, and even worse, because the worst part is that in the last week or two, Trump has made it clear what we always thought, that he really is, who wants to be Putin's ally. Like,
Yeah,
it seems like Trump, the more of a fascist dictator you are, the more he likes you. If you're a Democrat, then
I know.
he really has no time for you. So that's his preference, is people like Putin, Orban to a lesser extent, because Orban is not that important
No.
Putin is a much bigger player. So is it your sense that this continues, or your sense that potentially it could splinter?
I felt like, Trump's vision is to really to spend more time. I think he really has something with China. I think China scares him the most, more than Russia, frankly. I feel can he do without Europe? Not entirely, because there's still a lot of business here going on, and so money talks, right? And so I feel like there's going to be a pull away from Europe, but not entirely, just because of the implications of business. The European market is a big place for American companies to sell their product, their movies. There's
Hmm.
just so much there. So I think the business ultimately will talk, and so we might see a lot of talk on the political side, but unfortunately, money often has the last word. It's like with Canada. There's just so much going on. With Mexico, so much going on. NAFTA is really talking about like a big trade of business.
Hmm.
And so Trump's not, I would say, I was about to say not stupid. I don't know, but at least he understands the power of money and the economy. And I think anything that would move the stock market in a downward direction would worry him.
Hmm.
You know. So I think we talk about, what powers can stop Trump. The House and the Senate today, they can't. Right? We will have to wait until the midterms. The the justice system, yes, to some degree, but when it reaches the Supreme Court, what's going to happen then? The third thing that can stop him is, money, the stock market, businesses, the economy. That I feel like would be also something that we will see where it's going to push him to retract some of this stuff.
To retract, right, right, right. Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, one thing is that right now, the latest polls suggest that what he is doing is very unpopular in the U.S.
Mhm.
In the U.S., not in Europe. Here, I mean, we already know
Yeah.
that it's unpopular in Canada, and we
Yes.
understand that. But
Yes.
the question is how much that affects him as well over the next while, because pretty much, in fact, the more ridiculous, the more unpopular. The Gaza thing, he said
Yeah.
it has, I think, 20% support, 80% disapproval, and all kinds of other things. Well, Putin has a 10% approval in the U.S.
Yes.
This is despite the fact that a lot of the Republicans voted for him, but nevertheless,
Yes.
yeah.
I feel, I think the point you talk about is approval rating versus other ways of measuring like his popularity. Yes, I'm sure that he's worried about his about his rating, but at the end of the day, I feel like he also wants to do what he wants to do, and I feel like the finances plays a big role into it. Able to do big tax cuts for more tax cuts for the rich, more, letting companies and businesses thrive, um, without necessarily considering the implication for people. That I think is a big aspect. I mean, I would put this question to you. In your opinion, why are they putting so much emphasis on Doge or the government efficiency? Why is that such a hot topic?
Well, I it's a little puzzling at times because when I thought of Trump's true objectives, when Trump is a very transparent person, and in his just this corrupt intent, he's looking out for himself. He wants to enrich himself. He wants to look good. It's a very very egotistical journey that he's on, and I think that Elon Musk has other ideas. Elon Musk is an engineer who thinks he understands the world much better than he actually does. and he sees, yes, of course, there are always inefficiencies in government that need to be corrected, but he's taking a hatchet to it, brings out the axe and starts doing things. I think it would have been better for him to not have someone like Elon Musk, because it's so much easier to just steal from the treasury and not take things away from people. They're not going to be as upset as they're starting to become because of what is happening. But I suspect that Trump needed his money and his influence to get elected, and now they have
It's payback.
a necessary partnership. But I don't know how long this can go on, because they're almost like two separate paths. The way Musk is carrying on, inevitably, not just popularity, a lot of things can go wrong. Because, for instance, the unemployment will probably increase. I mean, he's firing a lot of people
Of
for
course,
one,
already.
right?
Yes.
Right. The economy is likely to not go well. And that's one of the things, by the way, that is most striking, that in all of Trump's political career, it's only now that people are disapproving of his economic approach in the numbers.
Hmm.
Before, they disapproved of all kinds of things, but not his even though, by the way, he knows nothing about the economy and has never
No.
had any positive. This is all BS, complete and utter BS. But the public, it's all these people that perceive reality the way they perceive it, and they're starting to say, "Oh, we don't like what he's doing with the economy." And part of the reason is that he's doing nothing about the economy. He's focusing on Canada, Gaza, Greenland, Putin. When it comes to the price of food, I don't see any objectives. I don't see any focus. So they're disapproving, and to me, this is likely to increase. Just, you could say,
Hmm.
based on common sense, but I also base it on the astrology, because in the astrology, and this is something I'm still trying to grapple with, that Musk's astrology, particularly in the middle of the year, is much better than Trump's. Musk's astrology now isn't good, and neither is Trump's at the moment. But Trump's, he does have a moment there because Jupiter's still in his sign. That's pretty good, but there are all kinds of energy swirling around them that are very complicated, including, of course, that could affect his health. That's probably
Yes.
the most
Mm.
critical thing. But what I notice is that when you have a lot of planets hassling you, things just don't go well. You don't get the results that you
Hmm.
want to get, and so uh, that to me is what is going on in 2025 for these two.
I agree. I mean, you're talking about the prices. The prices will go up, not even stay flat. They are not going to reduce. I see prices going up. I feel the second half of the year, to me, feels the most challenging for the economy, for the stock market, for the economy itself. And whenever I look in the cards, um, it the way that it looks like there's something this summer that I feel like it's particularly bad for both of them. I feel a particularly bad summer.
In the summer.
Yeah, I feel a
Well,
bad summer.
right. Well, see, the thing is though that, I mean, you can just right from that, you can make a pretty reasonable projection that would say, okay, well, if in the summer it's not going well, then probably it's not going to go any better in the fall or the winter. And I mean, for sure, the astrology in 2026 is a lot more complicated for both of them. In fact, Musk's, it's very clear that he goes from Jupiter to Saturn. That's not a good direction when you do things the way he does. Because the one thing about Musk, too, that I've noticed is he's a pretty heedless, stupid man on the level of just basic behavior. He goes to
Hmm.
meetings, I think recently carrying a chainsaw. He wants to do a lot of gesturing, a lot of, look, I'm cutting everything. This is a very unpopular way to behave. And so then
Yes.
when the cycles catch up to you, they tend to catch up to you in a really harsh way. But then this leads us to what is really important here, which is, do you, from your perception, do you believe or disbelieve that the next key moment in time is the next election, which is in 2026? And is that election the time to check these people, or do you say, no, that election is not going to make any difference, because whatever the reasons you bring up.
I feel like I feel like the midterm election will happen. I feel the House turning Democrat, and I think from that point on, things change. Do they drastically change? Maybe not, but I think it feels to me like the last 2 years are very, very difficult for Trump. You mentioned the health. I keep seeing two things. Like I see a surgery, and then it's been a long time that I see him on a wheelchair. So there's something here that I keep seeing. And so this is going to be, I feel, very difficult for him. But unless he is really in a very, very bad health position, he could very well do the 4 years. I hope not. But unless it's very serious health, I feel that he could very well go all the way. But all that being said, with a Democratic House, things can change. Like there could be impeachment, for example.
No,
You
for
know,
sure. Yeah, that changes.
so I mean, that changed the dynamic. Um, I feel like he's gonna feel trapped very soon because if what I feel is happening, the second half of this year, I see for the US no growth. Like we are what, like 2-3% right now. We might get to 0 to 1%. Right?
No growth.
So
Right.
we're not in a recession, but we're in
Right.
flat, right? So that makes 2026 more difficult, probably why you see all this pressure. And then that's terrible leading to the midterms.
Yes, and in nearly every, I would say all, some exceptions, but when there are world events that interfere, but in most cases in the U.S., what you notice is that the midterm elections following a win are always or nearly always really hard on the incumbent party. They're very
Of course.
difficult. Doesn't matter who it is. The people turn against the leader, and this speaks to something about our current electorate. They're often not very informed because you think to yourself, okay, so now you guys are saying that you're disapproving of his view of Putin. Well, you knew that you already knew this. You voted for him, and then I mean, it's almost immediate. So in other words, this goes to my understanding of American politics that in the current era we're in, and to some extent in the past too, but certainly now, whoever is in charge takes all the heat. They take all the
Yes, of
blame
course.
almost immediately. So that would be the case no matter how well you were doing it, particularly because what tends to happen is, especially when the person is trying to bring about some kind of change, right? And usually they
Yes.
do because they get elected. Obama got elected. He wanted to change the healthcare system. That became
Yep.
his doom. After that, his presidency never really recovered. Biden was doing pretty well until he left Afghanistan. That was a change. It's like, I'm going to leave. Big move, big problem, never
All
recovered. Right?
right. You're right.
Right. So this is the common thing that happens. And so it is very, very difficult to navigate past
To
that
change.
midterm point. The George W. Bush, because of 9/11, the country was behind them. They were
Yes.
able to elect. So, but of course, the big question mark that people will always counter back with and say, look, these people, they are so corrupt and so right wing dictatorial that they are going to try to stop, like have no election at all, or do some kind of cheating to make sure that they win, right? And I would say, based on the astrology that I see, I find that quite improbable. I don't think so.
I feel like no, the elections I see will take place. Yes, I mean there are always going to be some sort of interference. I mean we know that there was a form of Russia interference in the 2024 election. I'm not talking about votes or ballots or anything, but just like the bombing that was acknowledged as the false bombing that was acknowledged as a Russian interference by the FBI. So I feel comfortable to say it because it's public information. Um, Now, the other thing that you mentioned is that with the midterms and the role and responsibility of the incumbent in this particular situation, he has the Senate, he has the House, he has the presidency. Of course, he will blame everyone else, but people know that as a truth. He has full powers. So how can you deflect? It's not like you can say, yes, but the House blocked everything. You have the House, you have the Senate. All your well, all the people that you submitted for confirmations committee, they've all been confirmed.
Almost, yeah, pretty much, except
Well,
for a couple. Yeah, it's true. Matt
but
Gates.
I mean, like Gates was not even pushed forward all the
True,
way.
true.
So technically, everyone got confirmed. So there's a point where you're like, who can you blame? Biden? I mean, I mean, you see what I mean? Like there's
Oh yeah, no,
it's
for
like
sure,
a
for sure,
corner. Yeah, yeah.
for sure. It's always like that. It's you can do that, but that has a time expiry. There's a certain point where people will just vote with their feet. They show up and they'll disbelieve you. So yes, it's 100% true.
And it's really about the economy and what's left in people's pockets at the end of the day that makes the difference in the vote. It's the economy almost all the time. And so he's playing with fire because they're cutting. I think what will make a difference is they are they are cutting a lot of federal workers and services and all of that. Those people obviously are providing a service. I can't believe that you can always, like you said, you can always be more efficient. We can always be more efficient. The government certainly can. But generally speaking, those people had a function. So you remove the function, what do you think will happen?
Yes, it's inevitable. It's inevitable. I mean, this is the whole point. Is that it's why I said that he would have been better to not include this strategy, leave things as they
Yes.
are, and just carry on with his stealing, which is what he loves to do. Ripping the treasury up and taking it all for himself. So uh, I think in that sense, Musk may be an ally, but he's actually a big problem. And the thing is, though, these people are
Yes.
thinking, they're thinking about this idea that in the prior administration, he was not able to implement his agenda, whatever that was, because the deep state, in the form of these employees, was stopping him. But to me, that just seems strange and incoherent. It doesn't make a lot of sense, and it's not helpful to his own agenda, in my opinion.
Agreed. And also, I mean, you've noticed what has happened at the beginning of his term was the accident with the in DC, the plane and the helicopter. I feel like in people's mind, there's already a seed planted that, well, we can't mess up with air traffic control. Like this is so important, right? And I feel like it ties very, very much with what Musk is doing. And that's what I mean with those like basic services. Like if they are not taking place, it's it can have very severe impact. Like you remove the CDC, you remove, I mean, the bird flu is a serious threat. There's like this increase of all disease that are coming back, you know. That would be, I mean, one could argue that he lost to Biden in good part for the pandemic because of the pandemic. And
Yes.
so you would think, okay, well, I can't mess up with health again. And here what you see, they remove the CDC, they remove, like all the information to the public. So it's like there's no logic here.
Yeah, no, there is. No, that's 100% true. It's just a question of how much people believe that he's invulnerable, that he can take control of everything. That's people's fear. People's fear is that
Yeah.
all of this is just happy talk. You and I are saying, look, there's going to be an election. First answer that, no, there won't. Or if there is, they'll make sure that they cheat somehow. Maybe, but I just noticed that the astrology in 2026 is
Hmm.
considerably more hostile. In fact, for Trump, already by the summer, and that might be why you said what you said, by the summer, the Jupiter and Cancer cycle that we're going through next, right now Jupiter's in Gemini until June. The Jupiter and Cancer cycle is not a particularly helpful cycle to him at all, not even close. For Musk, it's pretty good.
Hmm.
It's okay. It's just that Musk has other counterpoints as well, but it's certainly better. Trump Trump started to do well exactly as Jupiter entered his sign, and that's when things improved. Because up to that point, he was in a lot of trouble. He was in court. He was convicted. There had been a
Yes.
long, long period of setbacks. Now it's there for a year. That's Jupiter cycle. Then it switches, and it's surrounded by, you could almost call it demonic energy. I mean, there are all kinds of things clawing at him. And the most dangerous to me is the health pattern because of where
Yes.
the cycles are. You know, um, so
Yep. The other thing I think, Andre, is, I mean, it's also a team, the government. And I mean, look at the people that have been confirmed. Patel, Gabbard, Pambandi, Exet. I mean, the list goes on. I mean, those people, I mean, they're really not, the type of people that you would like in those roles. And so you can only imagine that, they all have their own astrology, for example, if you look at their own, but all of their capabilities and the problems they'll face simply just because they're not really up to the task. And so
yeah,
I feel like there's also going to be issues from big issues, big mistake just from incompetent people.
yeah. So I guess maybe the bottom line to all this is when we put it forth, as a message to anyone hearing this, what can people do? What's your suggestion?
Mm.
Because
So,
in the end, that's
yes.
it, right?
So the first thing, I mean, I meet a lot of people through readings and people, I mean, these days, to be frank with you, like on a half-hour reading, maybe there's 20 minutes of personal questions, but there's always 5 or 10 minutes of what's going to happen to us Americans. And, what I try to say is like my first rule is observe, don't absorb. You can observe what's happening because you gotta know what's happening. Like you can't leave, like you can wake up in 4 years and just like hibernate and wake up in 4 years. That you can't do that. So you have to keep yourself informed. It's very important because it's a critical moment. This is very serious. Like we're under a threat. So you can't not ignore the news, but you cannot absorb it in a sense, like get upset at everything. And because that's what the news media want, it's just the constant cycle. And so watch a a non-emotional, kind of true to the facts website or YouTube channel, or where you actually get basic information of what's happening, and then go on with your life, because they want us to stop our lives. They want us to be so consumed with what's happening that we forget that we have our own life to live. I don't accept that Trump's going to take 4 years of my life and hijack it. I don't accept that. So I will follow what's happening, but I will try to focus on what I want to do. You can still, if you have personal projects, you can still your personal projects. Yes, there's going to be more restrictions, but by and large, we're still able to do what we want to do. So try to not get too absorbed, because I feel like it can really get to you. It can really get to you.
Yeah, and this dovetails with what you said earlier about how it feels as though the world, in a broad sense, is contracting, so that instead of the focus being as outward, it's more inward. So countries are doing that. That there might be a great teaching there, which is that it's the opportunity for individuals within these systems to turn more inward, in the sense that you wouldn't be doing this if there were no threat. Because if there were no threat,
No.
then you're so bedazzled and caught up in what is happening outside you, you don't even pay attention. Now you realize this is a threat, so I have to stay informed. I have to know what's going on, particularly if it affects me directly. I may need to make
Hmm.
phone calls. I may need to engage in activism. I certainly need to vote, all of that. But I also have an opportunity here to develop some new understanding of my own internal energy, so that these things are not going to affect me in the same way. And this is what tends to happen in life. It's only when you are uh,
Yes.
pressured that you make these kinds of efforts to reach a new place. And so then it could be that these years could make all the difference for many people. In terms of finding more inner peace and more inner balance, which I think
And be
is really
more,
important.
yeah, and be more spiritual, develop more of a spiritual connection, putting in, which is no different. I mean, to me, being more spiritual is no different than putting things in perspective,
It's true.
right?
It's true. And I think sometimes, though, what can happen to people is that they think sometimes that, oh yeah, well, that sounds good, but what is that going to do? Yes, maybe I'll feel a little more happy, more settled, but then I'll still have this problem. Well, yes, but see, when you find more happiness, more harmony in yourself, you are able to do better with the situation. You'll know what to do. This is really important to
Yes.
realize. Your intuition, your guidance improves, and so then
Yes.
whatever needs to be done is done, and what not, you just don't do anything about it because you can't. This is that famous rule that says, or that famous adage that says, control the things you can control, and the ones you can't, just accept it and be at ease.
And and to kind of build on that, the only thing you can control is your reaction.
Yes, exactly.
You
Yeah,
cannot control the event, but you can control your reaction to the event.
exactly.
That you have in you. So, I feel like, I think it can go to philosophies of Buddhism and Stoicism and things like that, where it's not new, right? If you look back, this is not the first time that this pendulum has shifted.
Yes,
Definitely not. Our grandparents have experienced it.
true.
It's
That's
not
very
that
true.
far. So while I think for us it's hard, it's because we had it good for a fair amount of time, and we kind of forgot that the threat was still there. And it's like a wake-up call at 6 in the morning that's very unpleasant.
Yes, yes, and this is the
Yes.
thing, that it's only many times. It's only when there's a crisis or confrontation or high pressure that a person will make a move in a certain direction. And this is where in the
Yes.
astrology you see this, where the planet of pressure is Saturn, because Saturn is the contraction force in the archetypal universe. And what'll happen is almost everyone complains when Saturn is there. They don't like the feeling, but then they'll also say, "Oh yes, that's when I started to put some energy into it and work on something, and then I developed what I am today." Right? And so it is the opportunity. It's that simple, I think. At the moment.
And we are here on earth to learn, to learn lessons. Um, of course, it's a philosophical, spiritual debate, but maybe there's a belief that we made the decision, the conscious decision to come here, to live this. And so now we have to make the best of it. I think we knew Earth is probably one of the hardest environment to live, right? It's not easy.
Mhm.
And yet we made the decision to be here. And yet we want to learn. And so we couldn't learn if everything was easy, right?
Yeah, no, and it's also the truth of the archetypal forces, that they work in that way. Contraction leads to expansion. Expansion eventually switches to contraction. There's a constant, in and out movement happening, and it's like, there are the biblical stories of 7 years of growth and seven
Yes.
years of lack, and this is just existence basically. And the only thing, as
Yes.
I understand it, is to align yourself with the situation. Don't resist it. Flow with it. Flow with the
Right.
energy. And then
Exactly.
what'll happen is, number one, obviously, you'll feel better, and presumably everyone's life is about feeling better, I think. But once you feel better, then you realize, oh, it's not just that I'm feeling better. I seem to be more clear minded about what to do. The problem is when you freak out, when you get all
Yes,
anxious and tense, you will make bad decisions almost always when you're in those
of
states, right?
course.
So it's
Of
why it's so
course.
important. There's really no option, even though you might say, well, how can you tell me not to be upset? I have to be upset.
Yes.
Well, maybe you do have to be upset, but it's not a good plan. It's not a good approach.
And it's more, I mean, the idea of flow and the idea of, trying to navigate the situation and weather the storm, right? And it will, I mean, obviously it's another philosophical thing, but everything is temporary in life. Everything is. Nothing is permanent. Everything is temporary.
Well, right,
Absolutely everything. Yes.
right. And I mean, the thing is, the pushback to that is when a person will say, "Yeah, that's great. You guys are really positive thinking, but what's going to happen when we all this becomes the U.S. becomes an autocratic
Right.
state where there's a king, there's someone in charge. What happens then? Well, the only answer I have to that is to say, I don't think that's going to happen. Okay, I'll just say it plainly, bluntly.
Well, yes, I agree. And then also the other answer is, and then maybe this is ties to what we do, is there's always something you can do. I've never seen a situation where there's absolutely nothing you can do. So whether you consult with an astrologer or a card reader to look at the different options and the different path you can take to resolve your particular problem, then we're now into solutions and trying to mitigate the problem that you're facing. Even if it's extreme, there's always something that one can do. And so that's, I mean, maybe not perfect answers, but always better options. And I think this is where, if you have a consultation, or if you look at your chart, or if you look in the cards, there will be options for you to take, and we can help you explore what those options could lead to without you trying physically every single option. That's the beauty of it.
That's true. That's also true. Sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
I certainly I use my own chart that way.
Yeah.
100%. I'm always checking in, including this thing that you said about the impermanence. That's often where you see a cycle, and if you've been studying it long enough, you realize, oh yes, this lasts about this long, and then it switches. But even more to the point is you realize, well, what is it that this force, what is it really doing? What is the
Mhm.
kernel, the essence? And you try to align yourself with it, and that can be invaluable. Yeah, there's no question, 100%.
And maybe the experience, whatever unpleasant experience you have, could be also a way for you to understand it and experience it, so that when of your friends or family goes through something similar, you actually can have the empathy and be of help for someone, which there's a lot of things you really can't understand it unless you go through it yourself.
So, can you talk a little bit about? So, you said you started looking at cards when you were very young, and so how has that journey been? You started with that, and then how did it evolve?
My journey's always been about a continuous learning into divination, which is what I believe is I want to be doing divination. And I've really added tools along the way, different card systems, different, I've looked into, even tea leaves reading, into scrying, into uh, different tools, just to augment a little bit the ability to practice the divination. It's like having different tools in your toolkit, and You can, in a consultation, you could use cards, you can use, I actually have runes, for example, like I have, and they all basically function the same way. It's the connection of your own intuition matching with some sort of tool, whether those are cards or not. At the end of the day, your intuition is also a tool that you use. For me, I've always felt comfort in the cards as a system to help me tune into the energy. So not just give the answers, but tune into ways to receive the answers. And the answers that if you ask, well, where are they coming from? For me, they're coming directly from my sixth sense. They're not coming from someone. They're not coming from a particular guide or anything. It's just what I feel is a sense of clairsentience. You just know, right? There would be a lot of time where the information comes to me and I just know. It's not I hear it, it's not I see it. It just comes and there's like strong feel, of knowing. And this can happen obviously in a reading where someone asks a question and then I get an immediate answer, but I would still pull some cards to verify my work and get maybe extra details. And I like also to validate. So, if someone say, "How do you see my job?" I would like to look first for validation that I'm on the right track. So I would say, "Oh, you work for a very large company, or your boss is a male or with dark hair." I like to validate that because then we're on the same page, like, and you build the confidence. So, but yes, it took me 40 plus years to navigate and learn different systems. Some very intricate, some more simple. Um, and then also explore mediumship, which is a whole different thing, but it's around the same spiritual development, which is not my primary expertise, but I just feel that, it's really cool and interesting. So this is the part that I've been developing more recently is the mediumship activities. Yeah.
Mediumship as in connecting with the other side?
Well, yes, and mostly people who crossed over. So your father, your mom, your grandparents, because I get a sense. I would do a reading, and then at some point, I said, I really feel like the presence of your father coming through. Is he someone on the other side? And then we start to get into a conversation, even though maybe the question was not related, but the energy, the presence is there. And so, but some people, I can do some mediumship, but this is not my primary expertise. But I enjoy it as a continuous development,
And it's
yeah.
you said you're teaching a tarot, a course in tarot, and so when you teach,
Foundations.
and when you teach that, are you teaching you, uh, the overall? I'm sure you're teaching everything, but is it primarily learn the meaning of the cards, or learn the meaning, but then also learn how to tune in intuitively? How does that work?
So actually, yes, there's a part where we have to talk about the meaning of the cards, but actually that's not the focus. Because if you want to learn the meaning of the cards, then I would tell you buy a book. You don't need me for that. And so the point that I want to make is that to learn how to read cards, the class explained how you build a relationship with the cards. And that's really the key. And the relationship I built with a particular card is not going to be the relationship you build with a particular card. I mean, let's just take the card of the moon. That's like one of the most intricate card. For me, the moon represents either a sense of shadow or a sense of creativity. right?
depending.
But for you, the moon might represent, the darkness, and that's actually okay, right? That's actually yes, you're gonna find books that say this card means this card means that. But really, what I want people to take away is how you're gonna develop a relationship with your cards that's gonna be unique to you, right? That's the key. It has to be, and so once you start to developing your own relationship with the card, then your reading are really gonna improve because the cards is an extension of you. And when you pull the cards, then you're not gonna jump into. I would recommend if someone never touched cards before, don't go into a book and read what it means. Just tell me what you feel when you see those cards. Does it feel positive? Does it feel negative? What is the energy that you feel? Right? And then at a later point, you can read the book and say what most people think the card means. Actually, to tell you the truth, when I first learned tarot, which was the first tool, I had a mentor, um, and what I was doing is I was taking a card, holding it in my hand, and saying what I felt
Without even looking at it.
whenever looking at it.
Interesting.
That's a way you connect with the card. So I I don't want this class to be, well, this means this means that, because like I said, there's plenty of books. I want to make people understand how you create that relationship, and that is the key. Once you have that relationship, you're gonna pull some cards, and it will tell you an answer. It will, and I think we had this discussion backstage, so to speak, is how to trust my cards. How do you, like, well, that's how you trust your card, because they speak to you.
Right. Yeah. So is there now like a question that might come up is would a person benefit from, for example, being always tracking when they use the cards, because the temptation is to keep using them. And so, for instance, if you say some question where you ask the question as very black and white, and then you record what the answer was, but then later you ask it again, you might get a different answer, and then in other words, it can get confusing to the point where you then get the answer that you want to get. And I mean, so how do you deal with that?
Well, I'm from the point of view that if you concentrate really, really well, if you shuffle your cards really, really well, if you ask your question really, really well, which is the most difficult part. The most difficult part is not the answer, it's the question. Once you have the question nailed and you pull your cards, this should be, I'm not saying clear cut, but it's the best answer you can get at this point. And I would say, unless this looks like completely foolish, don't pull more cards. Don't even add more cards to it. Sometimes I hear, well, let me pull a clarifier. Very often your clarifier will be messing up even more. So you have to look, what I would say is like either your 2, 3 cards or 5 cards, they tell you a story, or it doesn't. If it doesn't tell you a story, you leave them on the side, you go to sleep, you wake up in the morning, you have a fresh look. Now it's gonna start to make sense. But don't pull more cards, or don't, it's that's my opinion. You ask spirit for help. Spirit helps you.
Right.
Now you're gonna say, oh, you know what? I don't care what you said. Let me do it. It's disrespectful in a way. You see I mean,
Yeah, no, it
that's
makes
how I
sense.
feel,
Yeah, it makes sense.
right?
It's almost like the universe will mirror your attitude. So if your attitude is, I can channel the intuition, I can channel the spiritual guidance, then that's what will happen. And if you say, well, no, there's a demon in the room and he's going to give me the wrong card. Well, then that's probably what will happen.
Or if you read for yourself and then you say, I want to buy a new car, will I get a new car? And it says no, and you keep doing it until you get, like just basic, the son card. It's like, yeah, I got my son. I'm gonna get a new car.
Right,
Well, I mean, like, this defeats the purpose entirely. Actually, in this example, if this was not clear cut that you would buy the car, then the spirit were kind enough to give you an information to help you maybe avoid make a mistake,
right, right,
right? And so there's a bit of humility to go back and say, what do I need to learn? What do I need to know that maybe before I buy this car, is there like, I mean, I'm planning to buy this car, is that a good idea? And then you get the devil, death, it's like, well, what I mean, like, are you gonna put it aside and reshuffle and then say, okay, I got this card and I'm happy now? You can't ignore that. Like, obviously, maybe there's a safety issue, there's something, but they're just trying to help you. So, I mean, I'm extreme in the example, but you see what I mean? It's like you have to do the hard work of tuning in and trying to understand what it says.
right. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, in
But
that
I'm sure
sense,
it's the same. I'm sure it's the same with astrology, where you maybe maybe that's a question to you. Are there times where you look at your chart and you would like to see something and maybe you don't see it, and you're trying to find you could maybe look for ways to see what you want to see?
no, absolutely, yeah, absolutely. Because in astrology, a lot of it is the timing, so that so that when there's a lot of pressure happening, which could be months sometimes, but often it's less, then the idea is to have the right strategy, knowing what you're in, and then knowing what period follows. So for example, there might be a period that follows which is very different, which feels a lot more expansive. And so knowing the difference is really, really helpful. And then that way sometimes the counsel is have patience, stay with
Yes.
this for a little while before you make a decision, because you're more likely to make the wrong decision if you jump too quickly. I mean, many times people react to the sense of despair or restriction, not realizing that, as you said earlier, everything is impermanent and it switches, and then they think, well, why did I do that at that point? I was trying to make myself feel better too quickly when I could have just
Yes.
waited a little longer and then made a better choice.
Timing is always, I mean, it's hard with cards. Like, I'll admit, like, it's really hard. Timing is hard. I believe it's because timing is not so relevant in spirit,
Hmm.
right? They don't really see the time we see the time. I actually feel like time is an interesting aspect, time watching a fun movies or time doing the dishes doesn't feel the same time, the same hour. One goes very fast, the other goes I mean, so
Yeah,
you see,
I know.
like,
Yeah,
it's subjective. Yeah.
it's true. It's true. Yeah, it's very true. Well, it's been great talking with you. I really enjoyed this, and
Likewise.
I hope we can reconnect again soon to further explore the topic if you're up for it. And
Of
so
course, Andre.
the way the world is right now, I have a feeling that even if we just let a few days pass, there will be new things to discuss
Yes,
because everything is coming at us, fast and furious. So there's that.
absolutely. It was a lovely conversation. I really appreciate it, Andre, and thank you again for your
No, it was a pleasure.
invitation. It's very kind.
It was a
Thank you.
pleasure. It was a pleasure being with you. All right, we'll say goodbye for now to everyone. Bye, everybody.